is the Banner Ravens podcast. Paul Mancano and Jonas Shaffer live on a Wednesday in December, coming to you a day earlier than we usually are because the Ravens are playing a day early than they usually do. A Saturday game between the Ravens and the Steelers is upcoming. An exciting rematch. We'll have all the angles. We're going to draft the most interesting storylines that we are watching as we head into Saturday's game. And we'll talk about, of course, the ongoing Diontae Johnson situation. But first, the Banner Ravens podcast is brought to you by Toyota. Toyota has been building a legacy of excellence for years, from developing hybrid technology to upping the standards of safety and efficiency. Toyota is always innovating, always making progress. And with a superior lineup of in-stock SUVs, including the adventure-ready RAV4 and capable, affordable Corolla Cross, you can experience the legacy of Toyota for yourself. Visit buyatoyota.com, the official website for deals, to find out more. Toyota, let's go places. Jonas, we watched another episode of Hard Knocks last night. We finally got a little bit of Ravens action. It was mostly watching Roquan Smith get massaged under red light. But more importantly, we haven't seen a single cutaway to Jonas Shaffer in the locker room, on the sidelines, in the press box. We have gotten absolutely nothing of you. And frankly, the people, I think, are frustrated.
I think my big takeaway from that episode is that I should just start getting massages, and maybe that's my path. I don't know, Paul. Do you have a firm pair of hands that'd be willing to lend some help?
I don't think that that's an alternate career for me. I'm not a George Costanza level of hand model. I think my hands are soft. I don't know if they're strong enough to provide the kind of massage that Roquan was getting while he was still watching film under the red light. Do you think the red light actually does something, Jonas, or are you not?
That was impressive. I have no idea about the therapeutic benefits of red light, but I am not the first person to make this joke, so I won't take credit for it. But it was very funny that in an AFC North massage centric episode, we did not see neither hide nor hair of Deshaun Watson.
That's terrible. We're getting canceled for this. We also didn't see absolutely any of Diontae Johnson. The footage of John Harbaugh being told by either Diontae or Todd Monken or somebody else during the Eagles game that Diontae Johnson was not going to go in the game. There's footage of that. And John Harbaugh is mic'd up, and it's sitting somewhere in the trucks outside of one winning drive in Owings Mills. And it will never see the light of day. We'll never see that. We'll never see John Harbaugh's actual reaction to that, because they're never going to show us what his reaction was to Diontae Johnson telling his team straight up, I'm not going in the game, which is a real shame because I would love to see it. But we didn't see any of the Diontae Johnson ongoing saga in the Hard Knocks episode. But boy, it continues because he is not at practice. The Ravens released a statement a couple days ago that they have mutually agreed that he will skip practices. John Harbaugh was offered an opportunity to expound upon that and gave us absolutely nothing. He said, quote, "What I foresee, really, to be honest with you, and I'm really thinking about right now, is Pittsburgh and getting our team ready for Pittsburgh. So he won't be here this week, and next week it'll take care of itself." What does that mean, Jonas? What is going on?
Well, I wish I knew. I want to echo you that release the Diontae cut. I think we all want to see the Diontae cut of Hard Knocks, even if it's just him. I don't even know. I can't even imagine what that conversation was like. But
we haven't seen him for a single second.
He's not going to. No, I mean, not even in acknowledgement. Like, they've been asked plenty of questions about it. They have the time and the resources to turn around footage from as late as Sunday night, as late as Monday night in some cases, when they are showing like the pregame for Monday Night Football, and yet just nothing for the third straight week. But if Diontae is not playing this week and next week is basically a Thursday week, are you telling me that he's going to be back in the building for Sunday practice, for Monday practice? Is he going to be with the team as they travel on Tuesday? Does he have any chance of playing on Wednesday? All that seems incredibly unlikely. And so what his end of season contributions come down to is, like, do the Ravens feel like there's an opportunity in any kind of way for him to play in that regular season finale against Cleveland? I mean, we think that game will be meaningful. We think it could be for, a shot at the AFC North crown or to, stay ahead of the Broncos or the Chargers and in the wild card seeding. Uh, but also there's a possibility that the Ravens have wrapped stuff up and they've wrapped their seating up and there's just not a whole lot to actually play for. And like, frankly, I don't know in which of those scenarios the glass half full or the glass half empty, Diontae Johnson is more likely to actually play. Like,
Right.
do you want him getting snaps of a Tylan Wallace or a Devontae Walker when those guys could get some meaningful action with Lamar or Josh Johnson? Or do you want Diontae Johnson getting some snaps in there and making up for lost time because you don't need to play Rashad Bateman as much, because you don't need to play, um, you know, Zay Flowers as much? Or do you just feel like if it's a game that you have to win and that Browns defense can be pretty feisty, even though obviously the quarterback situation is just back to being a total cluster F. Um, does he give you a more material opportunity to win than Nelson Aguilar or a Tylan Wallace or wherever he right now is in that depth chart? So uh, I think it's pretty unlikely we see him in these next two games just because of the short turnaround. And at that point, maybe he'll have been released and maybe he'll have been suspended again. But if he's not, I just don't know where that leaves him for that finale and then therefore for the playoffs as well.
Yeah, I mean, if you're the Ravens, why would you reward him by putting him back on the field? If he doesn't want to play for you, if he doesn't want to practice for you, you have a fourth round rookie in Devontae Walker who just caught his first NFL touchdown and has been doing and saying all the right things. And he's coming along slowly. He's a project. They knew that when they drafted him. Why not give him more opportunities to get to work with Lamar Jackson? Because that's what's going to matter more in 2025 is can he be somewhat of a contributor on this team going forward? Diontae Johnson has told you straight up he doesn't want to play for you. And the Ravens having him still on this team and not cutting him, I think is less about him playing in the final couple weeks of the season or in a playoff game and more about them just wanting to make sure that if he signs somewhere else in the offseason, that they will get a compensatory draft pick in 2026. But he's lowered his value so much that they're probably not going to get anything. I mean, though they might have a chance to cancel it out anyway by making a signing of their own in free agency. And the fact that he has one catch for this team in, the second half of the season and has willingly sat out games, what team is going to hand him a big contract this offseason and allow the Ravens to recoup some kind of assets? So this is just a staring contest between Diontae Johnson and the Ravens. It's ugly. It's been ugly since the moment they traded for him. And it's frustrating because he obviously has immense talent and the Ravens want to see him used in games, but he clearly does not want to be there. And he came into this situation with a bad attitude saying, I don't want to be fourth fiddle on this wide receiver core that is much more talented than I am. He could have come in here and just gone along with the flow and just bought in. And maybe he wouldn't have had 300 yards in the final 8 games of the season, but at least he could have shown that he is a good teammate, that he is willing to take a backseat role if need be. He hasn't done any of that. He hasn't helped his value in free agency. He hasn't helped the Ravens, and it's a bad, ugly situation.
And he's not doing himself any favors in our storyline draft pool. Okay, I think he would have been a top 2 pick if he was available for the rematch against the Steelers, especially considering everything that Mike Tomlin said or didn't say about him last week, or last time they played, where he was like, you know what, he hasn't even entered my mind, and that proved kind of prophetic because
Yep.
I think he just got the 1 or 2 targets, and neither of them, I believe, was a catch. Neither ended up in a catch. So. Um, what are you gonna do? I don't know if we're gonna see him again in the locker room. I don't know if we're gonna see him again this season. But I guess it was nice knowing you, Deontay. There's not a whole lot else, not a whole lot else that we can kind of glean from until we talk to more players. I mean, hopefully we can talk to like a Roquan or someone this week who has a more authoritative perspective and doesn't really have to go to work with him every day in that wide receiver room. I'm sure Roquan is pretty principled about stuff like guys asking out of games, and I'd be curious to get his thoughts on how this is all kind of unfolded.
Yeah, and you also brought up before we started recording here that if the Ravens were to just cut him, not only do they lose out on the chance that they could get a compensatory pick down the road, but also, maybe another team picks him up. Maybe a playoff hopeful team picks him up and he's more willing to play a bigger role on a team like Denver that has a depleted wide receiver core, and they're able to convince him that he'll get enough targets to satisfy his needs. And the Ravens end up playing Denver in a playoff game, and Diontae Johnson catches the touchdown against them. So they're really just kind of holding him hostage at the moment, and it's not pretty. Let's get to that draft that you mentioned, Jonas. The storylines. I'll give you the number one overall pick because you not only came up with the exercise of drafting, but you came up with a lot of these topics. What is your most interesting topic heading into Saturday's game? If you were to put them all out on the table on a draft board, what are you watching for closely on Saturday?
I mean, I think you just have to go with the Occam's razor suggestion here, which is that there's a lot of stuff up at stake for the Ravens right now, and certainly probably more for the Steelers. If the Steelers win, then the AFC North is theirs, top four seed is theirs, and the Ravens are going to have to hit the road as a playoff team. The Ravens, if they win, they can keep their playoff hopes alive. I think we're going to talk about it later, but they have like about a 35% chance of winning the division right now, according to the New York Times playoff simulator. If they win, those odds go to about 50-50. Obviously, if the Ravens win just straight up, then they do get a playoff bid that is theirs. But it's the most consequential part of Saturday's game. It's the most obvious part of Saturday's game. We've known now, I believe, for a couple weeks that the Pittsburgh's AFC North title chances, it wouldn't come down to this, but it could be decided in this game. And it would certainly suck if you're a Ravens fan or a Ravens player or Ravens coach if you go to Baltimore, if you go to the bank on Saturday and you see the Steelers, with Russell Wilson as quarterback celebrating an AFC North title on your turf.
Yeah, and to put even more emphasis on just how important it is to win the division, because obviously you know how important it is because you're guaranteeing yourself at least one home playoff game. But only 7 teams ever have won the Super Bowl as a wild card team. The last team to do it was the Tom Brady Tampa Bay Buccaneers in 2020. And before that, it was Green Bay with Aaron Rodgers in 2010. So there was a 10-year gap. It is incredibly hard to go on the road for 3 playoff games in your conference and then go to the Super Bowl and win it. And so you want to win the division. It just goes without saying, but you want to win that division. One topic I am particularly looking forward to discussing after Saturday's game is Patrick Queen coming back to Baltimore, because we saw him ball out in the first matchup between these two teams. He talked before that game about how it was emotional. Now he seems to be over it. Now he seems to want to turn the page on his Baltimore career. And especially at a time right now where the Ravens' own linebacking core is a little bit of a question mark. Roquan Smith, I think, has played better as the season has gone along. He started the season not out on the best foot against Kansas City and had some rough weeks, but in the second half, he's looking like his old self. But next to him, it's been a hodgepodge. We saw Trenton Simpson play a season low in snaps in their most recent win against the Giants, and we've seen a lot of Malik Harrison. We've seen some of Chris Board. So if the Ravens, their own linebacking core, can play better than they did against the Steelers a few weeks ago, and if Patrick Queen doesn't have the same kind of emotion going into this game, maybe the balance will shift a little bit. But for right now, Patrick Queen has the upper hand when talking about the rematch between these two, former team and former player.
Yeah, and we appreciated his frankness in Baltimore when he was with the Ravens, and appreciate his frankness now as a Steeler. He was telling Pittsburgh media yesterday that he's expecting a lot of FUs. He's expecting curse words, middle fingers, the whole kit and caboodle, because it doesn't take a whole lot for you to upset Ravens fans. And I think probably that the biggest offense that you can do is leave for Pittsburgh on a big money deal and talk some shit on the way out. And Patrick Queen definitely has done that. And him being on a team with a superior record has probably poisoned some of those waters as well. So he is looking for, I don't want to say redemption, but I think there continues to be some frustration among Steelers fans about his play, because there's a lot of missed tackles. Just the
Sounds
splash
familiar.
plays haven't been there. Yeah, but he was really good in Baltimore, I think last year, and it just hasn't translated. And he was really good against the Ravens in Week 11. So I agree with you that the like the disparity, I guess, between uh, Patrick Queen and whoever is Roquan Smith's Robin is going to be pretty glaring if the Ravens can't stop the run, which they should be able to. But if they can't, do anything as blitzers, or if they're getting diced up over the middle, which is also a little bit less likely because that's just not where Russell Wilson throws the ball. But yeah, I mean, for everyone who thought that Trenton Simpson would be a ready-made Patrick Queen replacement, that has clearly not been the case. Maybe Patrick Queen would have fallen back to earth and had terrible PFF grades in his first year with Mike McDonald, in Seattle, but probably not. But there's going to be a lot of bad blood for Patrick Queen. I wonder if we'll see any Patrick Queen, number 8 jerseys in Baltimore on Saturday.
What's your next storyline you're drafting, Jonas?
I thought it was pretty interesting of Marlon Humphrey to talk about what Mike Tomlin's strategy is against the Ravens. I believe we talked about this on the podcast last time, how Mike Tomlin had told the team last year that, if you stay with the Ravens close, this team, meaning the Ravens, will try to burn the house down late. And Marlon Humphrey himself, I don't think he's, aware of those comments or that story, but he said basically that what Mike Tomlin wants to do is keep it close, then win late. And I don't think there would be a single thing more infuriating to Ravens fans than to not just, lose this game to the Steelers, give up any chance of an AFC North title, but also to lose in the way that the Steelers have made a masterclass of over the past 5 years. Just, hanging around despite not being as talented or not being as healthy, doing the small things, having the offense just, shit itself, having the defense give up a bad play. That is going to be a huge problem if the Ravens can't close out a team late because of all of the history of, this Ravens team not doing enough, or just, the classic Ravens loss, even though I think there's been a pretty wide diversity of what those kind of diagnoses for those defeats are. But if the Ravens are in this late and they can't close it out, then I think a lot of fans are going to be wondering not only what this means for Mike Tomlin's mastery over John Harbaugh, but like the Ravens' chances in the playoffs. Because sure, it doesn't take a whole lot to blow out a team like the Giants, in week 15 or whatever, but you're going to be facing a lot of teams like the Steelers in the playoffs. And if you continue to run your head into a wall and just aren't able to get over the hump in these close margin, high leverage spots, if you can't do it in week 16 in Baltimore, then what does it say for your chances of doing it and finally breaking through in the playoffs?
Yeah, I mean, what does it say that Mike Tomlin does want to get it close at the end, and every time they just come out on top in a one-score game at the end? They are the more physical, they are the better coached, they are the tougher team down the stretch. It's not just the fact that Lamar Jackson and John Harbaugh have struggled against the Steelers. It's the way that they've lost those games. I mean, the Steelers get the Ravens to play their worst football, and particularly offensively. They get them to play ugly, ground and pound football that they're dropping passes. Lamar Jackson is inaccurate. He looks rattled. Something about this Steelers team has the Ravens numbers. As much as the Ravens and Lamar Jackson, Zay Flowers talking the other day to the media, try to downplay it, there is something there. And Mike Tomlin just knows how to attack this team. And if they come out of here with another loss in the same way that they have lost in previous seasons, it does not bode well for this team, because you are going to, like you said, face teams like that in the playoffs. You're going to be playing in cold weather games. You could be playing in Buffalo or Kansas City on the road. I know they're going to be home on Saturday, but you need to be able to grind out some tough wins. It's not just all about, racking up these wins against like Tampa Bay and Dallas by throwing the football and racking up these incredible offensive stats. You need to be able to win these tough, low-scoring games, and they haven't been able to do that against the Steelers. Look at the scores of the last several games that they played in. Twice last year, I know the second time was a meaningless Week 18 game, but 17-10, they lost both those games by that score. Steelers did not score a touchdown in their most recent matchup, and yet the Steelers came out with the win. So It does not say good things about this team if they lose yet another tough, in the trenches, brutal, physical AFC North battle to the Steelers on Saturday. I
Yeah,
am.
I mean,
Go
if I
ahead.
can throw a stat your way, Paul, stealing something from our Ravens offense breakdown, but Ravens past 8 games against Pittsburgh, and again, very, very few Lamar starts in this sample size, so don't put a whole lot of stock into it. But 16 points, 10 points, 10 points, 13 points, 16 points, 13 points, 19 points, 14 points. They cannot reach 20 points. They haven't been able to reach 20 points against them in their past 8 games. They have been held under 20 points in 23 games since they last scored 20 points against Pittsburgh. So November 2020. So 8 of those 23 games in which they've failed to score 20 points in the past 4+ years have been against the Steelers. That is an unconscionably high number for a team that you only play twice a year.
Yeah, it's been ugly. One thing I am watching particularly closely is the play of one Justin Tucker, who was not given a field goal attempt in their most recent game against the Giants because the Ravens just kept scoring touchdowns. He made all of his extra points, and he has said the right things coming out of the bye. The team has stuck with him. They didn't bring in any competition for him. But the last time these two teams met, Justin Tucker missed 2 field goals, and it was a large reason why they lost. We have to be able to be confident in Justin Tucker in these final 3 games going into the playoffs in order to feel good about this team's chances. Because if your kicker is not right, if your kicker is kicking like the worst kicker in the league, like he has been this season, you are not going to be able to win close games against Buffalo and Kansas City and Houston in the playoffs when it matters most. So Justin Tucker has to get it right. It's a make or miss league when it comes to kickers, and he's just got to make his kicks when he's given the opportunity on Saturday.
Yeah, and it's gonna be a cold game, and that's gonna matter. And not just Justin Tucker, but special teams in general. This is a Steelers special teams unit that I believe is number one in the NFL in DVOA. So they know what to do. They are great at blocking kicks, great at blocking punts. If Lord willing, it comes down to another uh, fourth quarter, slot fest, then the Ravens are going to have to get all their affairs in order. They can't, let this unit that's been so up and down all season continue to hurt this team. So special teams, special teams, special teams. That they have to be locked up. They have to be buttoned up. They have to continue some of the momentum that they got against the Giants, which is going to be tough because you're going up against probably the best special teams units in the NFL. My last pick, and this is more of a pregame storyline than an in-game storyline, is just the health of these Steelers stars. George Pickens, T.J. Watt, probably the 2 most important players on either side of the ball for Pittsburgh. I guess excluding Russell Wilson, but neither of them practiced on Tuesday. I think T.J. Watt is more in line with what he does, but him having that low ankle sprain, it sounds like he should be good to go against the Ravens on Saturday. Again, like I go back to, I think it was a 2020 game against the Ravens. That was a COVID season for a lot of guys. He was, I think, put on COVID lists before the game in Pittsburgh on like the Monday, and he wasn't activated off COVID list until Saturday. So he missed the entire week of practice, was probably feeling like crap with COVID. In that game the following Sunday, so one day after he's activated off the COVID list, he has 3.5 sacks. So he went the entire week without practicing and still had a defensive player of the week type of performance. So whatever he's dealing with physically, whatever he's dealing with mentally, I feel like you can pretty much pencil TJ Watt in for an impact performance. And that's going to matter because they're going to have, a fantastic, even more fantastic defensive line going up against the Ravens because they didn't have Alex Highsmith in week 11. They're going to have him now. Nick Herbig continues to be a force. Cameron Hayward is up to 8 sacks. And then on the offensive side of the ball, George Pickens, it's been interesting to see the various talking heads in Pittsburgh be a little bit split about whether he's going to play on Saturday because, certainly you need him for this game with that hamstring, but they are also doing the Saturday to Thursday turnaround. They also have to be mindful of his availability for the postseason. So some guys in Steelers media think he's going to play. Some think he won't. I imagine it'll probably split the difference where he's not out there every single snap. But then you also have to be mindful of like this is going to be a really, really cold weather game. And from my days as a youth athlete, it's you are you're kind of playing with fire a little bit if you overdo it, and if you're not warmed up enough, and if you are playing on a kind of bulky hamstring in cold weather, then you're probably going to tweak it again. And I just wonder, you know, one, can the Steelers offense do anything if George Pickens doesn't play? And then two, if he does play, how effective is he going to be? How much is he going to play? Because we saw last week against the Eagles that Steelers offense was nothing without him.
Yeah.
I mean, they scored a couple points, but a lot of that was good luck, and just being at the right place at the right time and capitalizing on Eagles turnovers.
Right. Yeah. I mean, this offense desperately needs George Pickens. I think the high was 35 degrees on Saturday, but the sun is probably going to be dipping down midway through the first quarter because it's a 4 o'clock game. So they're going to be, it's going to be cold. It's going to be probably 29 degrees when this game is in the second half. And we know the South Florida boy Lamar Jackson also needs to be, staying near the heater as much as possible. There was a shot in Hard Knocks, I think, of him staying near the heater because he was absolutely frigid. He's going to be bundled.
yeah.
Let's just say that much. My final draft pick, my Mr. Irrelevant storyline that I am watching in this game is Lamar Jackson's MVP odds, because we've seen the Josh Allen train run away from the station. The dominant win, I wouldn't call it dominant, but his offense was certainly dominant, win over the Lions in what could be a Super Bowl preview. Certainly helped his narrative, even though Lamar Jackson on that very same day threw more touchdowns than interceptions. And look, we listened to the tape. Incompletion, sorry. We also more touchdowns than interceptions. We'll go back and watch the tape. We're just like the team, Jonas. I go back and listen to the episodes. We did not spend nearly enough time on the most recent Banner Ravens podcast episode talking about how good Lamar Jackson was in that game. I know the Giants have probably the worst defense in the NFL, but it was absurd that he went 21 of 25, had 5 touchdown passes, and also still didn't have a perfect passer rating. That just goes to show, honestly, what a flawed stat that is, that he was that efficient, that good, and he still didn't have a perfect passer rating, but he was as close to perfect as possible. And he still has so many statistical categories where he has been better than Josh Allen this year. Almost every category. It's pretty much rushing touchdowns and wins that Josh Allen has. But we've talked about it on this podcast. It's incredibly hard for a team with 5 losses to have an MVP at quarterback. So it's frustrating that he has somewhat been relegated to, second or third in the MVP conversation, while Josh Allen has jumped out to first, especially because, are we all forgetting about the week 4 game where the Ravens absolutely dominated the Bills, where Josh Allen and the Buffalo Bills put up 10 points and the Ravens stopped at that time the best offense in the NFL? I mean, Josh Allen came into that game with 7 touchdowns, no picks, and the Ravens made his life hell that day. And Lamar Jackson put up 41 points for the Ravens at that time, 35 points. So let's cool it with the Josh Allen MVP talk. Let's talk a little bit more about Lamar Jackson and how good he's been this season. And I think that starts with us. That starts with our own podcast, Jonas.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you're John Harbaugh and you really want Lamar to win another MVP, I think as soon as this game ends, and if it ends with a win, then you're talking up the Steelers defense as being world beaters, and then you're going to be talking up the Texans defense as world beaters. I mean, Steelers are 7th in defensive DVOA, and the Texans are number 1 in DVOA. So I don't know how much awareness there is of how good this Houston defense is because of all the consternation and disappointment around that Texans offense, and CJ Stroud not being the dude that we thought he would be. But that's going to be a huge test, a huge test, and it's going to be on Christmas Day on Netflix. I don't know how big that audience is going to be compared to if they were playing on like a regular Sunday on, or even like a Sunday night game, because Netflix is obviously very cloak and dagger about all their viewing statistics. But if Lamar's lights out and Josh Allen is only okay against just the very very soft schedule that he has the rest of the way, then maybe that is enough to flip the narrative. I mean, I think, as you said, the Ravens are probably going to have to win the AFC North for Lamar to have a realistic chance. But if they're winning the next 2 games, and they're probably winning the AFC North.
Yeah, and the Bills' remaining schedule is the Patriots twice and the Jets. So just another opportunity for Josh Allen to rack up some better stats before the end of the season. It's yes, the Ravens have tougher competition. That'll make their wins more impressive if they do get wins. That's part of the reason that Lamar won the MVP last year, was beating the Niners on Christmas in front of a national
Yep.
audience. Beating the Dolphins, who were at that point a very good team, beating good teams down the stretch. But Josh Allen, if he's already viewed as the favorite, really all he needs to do is kind of coast to the finish line in order to win this thing, unfortunately. All right, Jonas, let's get into this matchup between the Ravens and the Steelers. My word of the day today, Jonas, is tiebreaker. Definition: a system for breaking a tie. Score at the end of regulation play by establishing a winner through special additional play, usually of a fairly short duration, as in tennis and soccer. And I would like to add, and football. First known usage between 1960 and 1965. Jonas, there are infinite tiebreakers for the AFC North. And by infinite, I mean 12. And the final one is a coin toss. You wrote about on the BaltimoreBanner.com, where you can subscribe $1 for 6 months, about all the absurd permutations that the league can run through in order to determine a winner in this division. Can you imagine if it came down to a coin toss, though? I mean, the odds are simply astronomical, but it would be absurd if this was literally decided. Where would they have the coin toss? Would it be broadcast? Who would be watching this? Who gets to call heads? I mean, it's a fascinating question here.
Was it the Saturday Night Lights? Excuse me, not Saturday Night. Was it the Friday Night Lights movie where there's a coin toss scene to determine
I haven't
a
seen that
a
movie in a long
playoff
time.
tiebreaker?
The one with Billy
I
Bob
think I
Thornton?
think
Yeah.
yes, I think there was. But yeah, I mean, like there's a reason that in the tiebreaker story, which is called the Ravens have a few paths to an AFC North title. They all start with a win versus Pittsburgh. There's a reason I stopped after 6. I mean, the Ravens.
I was
Uh,
reading that article and I was really hoping. You said they would probably only need 5 or 6, but I was reading it going, God, please get to 12.
no, I mean, like, I
They're not that
considered
much
it
of a
just so I
stick-up.
could have the just so I could have the pithy remark of, if the Ravens get to a coin toss, their odds of winning are about 50-50. But there's only so much time in the day.
That's good.
I guess what's interesting is like the Ravens have some paths to winning a tiebreaker before we get to probably their most likely tiebreaker win, which is strength of schedule. But they will need some help from teams that are playing the Steelers. Like they need the Steelers to drop conference games. They'll need the Steelers to perhaps drop AFC North games. So it's there's so many different permutations in ways that this could go. But I guess just keep your eye on the ball in terms of like which way this could go, because there's a reason the Ravens are not favored to currently win the AFC North, and it doesn't just have to do with their inferior record. It also has to do with how the Steelers have done in conference games, how the Steelers have done in common games, which is basically their record against teams that both them and Baltimore have played. So we'll know more pretty soon about just how this is going to shake out. But yeah, it's I don't think we'll see a coin toss, but if the Ravens win on Saturday, then I feel like we're going to get some tiebreakers at some point.
Yeah, I mean, you said it. The Ravens cannot win the division. The division is over if the Steelers win that game. If the Ravens win, they enter into a tie with both teams having 2 games remaining. The Ravens just win those 2 games and the Steelers lose one of those 2 games, then the Ravens win the division. But if they either each win one, each lose one, or both win both games, or God forbid they both lose the final 2 games of the season, then we start talking about, AFC North record. We start talking about, common opponent record. It just gets very, very messy after that. So the Ravens just need to win this game Saturday to keep their hopes alive. They need to win the final 2 games and just hope that Pittsburgh loses one of their final 2 games. And if not, well, stay tuned on the BaltimoreBanner.com, because Jonas is just going to keep you updated with all of that. You mentioned some of the injuries coming into this game for the Steelers rather. George Pickens, after the Steelers had a walkthrough, so these are estimates, did not participate in that walkthrough. TJ Watt, the 2 big names to watch in that one. For the Ravens, in terms of their health, they go into this game pretty healthy. Nelson Aguilar did not participate. Tuesday with a concussion. Ardarius Washington was limited with the ankle injury. Jalen Armour-Davis, hamstring injury, did not practice or did not participate, but they still go into this game relatively on the right side of the injury report.
Yeah, and Ardarius was walking around the locker room fine on Tuesday, so I don't think it was anything too bad. Again, these are all estimates. I mean, we should also mention on the Pittsburgh side of that ledger, Sean Elliott did not play Sunday against the Eagles, dealing with a hamstring injury. I know he's not, uh, Ravens fans probably don't have all that too great memories of him because he was not really a factor at all in his Baltimore career, but he has become a nice box safety for the Steelers, who would be, I think, pretty important for how they fit the run against Derrick Henry, Lamar, Justice Hill, all those guys. So if he's not able to go on Saturday, I think that could be a potentially significant loss for that Steelers team. Justin Fields also dealing with an abdominal injury. Obviously, we saw him in certain spots against the Ravens in that Week 11 game. He's a situational type weapon just because of what he can do with his legs. I know that there was some talk from Steelers fans about maybe making him like the red zone quarterback because of just how bad Pittsburgh has been inside the 20. That hasn't, borne out, but just having him be the kind of change of pace option for Russell Wilson, especially if Russ is struggling, I think could be an important absence if he's not available to go. And then, just like a guy like Larry Ogunjobi, who I think, was part of another really good defensive line effort from the Steelers in Week 11. So he was practicing yesterday, dealing with a groin injury, but just a lot of guys to kind of keep your eye on.
Let's look back at the last time these two teams met. What went wrong for Baltimore in that game? And it felt like a Murphy's Law kind of game where everything that could go wrong did go wrong. They were beat in all three phases of the game: offensive, defensive, special teams. I think defense probably bore the least amount of brunt because they allowed a bunch of field goals, but that was it. They did not allow the Steelers to score a touchdown. And that was the first kind of game where we were getting a glimpse of, all right, maybe this defense is going to be better in the final 2 months of the season than they were for the first 2 months of the season. But it really started with Derrick Henry fumbling the ball 2 snaps into the game, and it just felt like the Ravens were always playing catch up. I know they had the lead at one point, but it just felt like it was not their day. The wide receivers were dropping passes just like they did last time these two teams met in Pittsburgh. Lamar Jackson at his worst game of the season. It still wasn't like shield your eyes bad because that's just how good he's been this season. His lows still aren't that low. His receivers weren't there for him. Under 50% completion, had that incredibly unlucky interception where he throws it up to Justice Hill, and Hill appears to catch it, and then he and Peyton Wilson roll in the ground, and Peyton Wilson kind of comes out with it at the end of that ended up being ruled as an interception. But frankly, honestly, that could have been even called a completion if you would rule that Justice Hill was down at that point. But that was a tough game. But it was a tough game for Lamar Jackson. It was also a tough game for Derrick Henry. Had that fumble, also only had 13 carries in that game. Jonas, you wrote here on the notes, avoid under center runs unless absolutely necessary. And you put that in all caps. Why was it such a problem for the Ravens to run the ball under center in the last game?
Well, it wasn't really. I mean, they did fine running under center. They didn't do it a whole lot. I'm just talking in general. Like Derrick Henry had that nice 31-yard run up the middle with the fake end around to Zay. He also scored, from under center near the goal line. Only 5 under center runs in total, but you look into the stats. They are allowing 2 points. The Steelers are allowing 2.2 yards per center against under center runs this year. So I think we're going to see a lot of pistol. We're going to see a lot of shotgun. I just think that is the best way to handle this Steelers defense. Maybe that hurts you with the dropbacks and the safety for that pocket because Lamar was pressured on 40% of his dropbacks. Did not have a lot of clean reads. Was scrambling around a whole heck of a lot. Average time to throw in that Steelers game 3.62 seconds, which is like basically a full second slower than Tua in an average game. So they're going to need some answers for this Steelers pass rush because, like we mentioned, it's not just Watt and Hayward you have to worry about. It's Herbig and now it's Highsmith. I mean, you look at the PFF grades for for the Steelers in that last game. I think 3 of their top 5 highest graded players were edge rushers, and that's a scary thought. Even though Roger Rosengarten has really rounded into form, and Ronnie Stanley is for the most part a pretty trustworthy left tackle.
And offensively for Lamar Jackson, I mean, they've talked about this week. They talked about after the game, and they've talked about this week in preparing for this game. Lamar has just said it was penalties. It was bad first down plays that backed the Ravens up, left them in third and long situations that really thwarted them. He wasn't. He maybe he knew that schematically, maybe he knows what's going on that the Steelers are doing, and a lot of it is early down blitzes, but not blitzing a whole lot on third down. But he's simplifying it to more just saying let's be more efficient on first and second down so that we're not in these difficult third downs. Ravens went just 4 for 11 on third downs in that game. Even though they generated more yards per play, they kept backing themselves up with penalties. That was an especially bad penalty game. Ravens were penalized 12 times for 80 yards. And in the last game against the Giants, several times this year, a lot of the penalties have been racked up by the defense, whether it's defensive holding, defensive pass interference. This game felt like the offense was constantly shooting itself in the foot by committing penalties, and maybe that'll change because they're at home and they're not dealing with the Pittsburgh Yinzers terrible towels group yelling in their face. But they absolutely have to play cleaner football in this game.
I will push back a little bit on the Steelers fan presence. I'm working on a story on that, Paul. I reached out to Vivid Seats, who do fan projections based on, I guess, their proprietary data on who's buying tickets, who's selling tickets, that kind of thing. Do you want to take a guess at what the projected fan ratio of Steelers fans to Ravens fans will be for Saturday's game?
I mean, I would hope it's at least 80% Ravens fans. Am I wrong?
They're thinking 65-35 Ravens fans,
Oh,
Steelers fans.
yikes. That wouldn't be ideal. Too many terrible towels, I think.
I know. And I don't think the Ravens are going to kind of get as, I don't want like kitschy. Is that the right word? When the Steelers travel to the Commander Stadium, Northwest Financial Field, or whatever it's called, like they handed out like burgundy towels to kind of counteract the terrible towels, because whenever Pittsburgh plays the Commanders, they just invade that stadium because of how hollowed out that fan base has been, and so they tried to counteract it with like some kind of gimmicky towels. I don't think the Ravens are going to do that. I asked to speak to Ravens front office officials about just what they might be doing fan wise this year, but obviously they're going to decline that, and they're not going to acknowledge that it's a problem. But we've seen this year from some of the nearby fan bases, like the Commanders had a lot of fans in town for that Week 6 game, because obviously there was a lot of hype around what that Commanders team could be. And then of course the Eagles in the Week 13 game, probably not as many fans as we'll see Steelers fans, but there was a whole heck of a lot of Kelly Green by the end of that one when the Ravens had lost and all the fans had gone home. So, I mean, the Ravens are definitely going to have the home advantage in this one, but it's going to be, I think there's going to be some black and gold in the stadium for sure.
Yeah, probably. And then on the defensive side, the Ravens played a great game against the Steelers. 4 weeks ago, 5 weeks ago, just do that again. Basically, just they got Russell Wilson. They got a lot of pressure on Russell Wilson. They sacked him 4 times. They forced him to make some bad decisions. The interception in the end zone where Marlon Humphrey picked it off that frankly should have lost the game for the Steelers, and then the Ravens turn it right back over on that next possession. But the last time they met, 13 drives for the Steelers, 0 touchdowns, 6 field goals, just 18 points. Russell Wilson just wasn't that impressive. He wasn't that impressive last week against the Eagles. This is a very beatable offense. And if George Pickens isn't playing, the Ravens really shouldn't have an excuse for allowing this team to score 20 or more points.
Yeah, I mean, the Steelers' run game was probably the more surprisingly effective aspect of that offensive performance. Najee Harris, Jalen Warren combined for over 100 yards rushing, about 5 yards a pop in that one. But you got to add the caveat that the Ravens didn't have Michael Pierce available for that one. Travis Jones was dealing with an ankle injury. Roquan Smith missed basically the entire fourth quarter. And, I think they'd been on the field a lot at that point, and I think they were starting to kind of catch those vapors. So I think you feel really good about this run defense where it is, especially considering that the Steelers cannot do much of anything against the Eagles last week. So if they continue to insist on just banging their head into a wall on first and second down, then Russell Wilson is going to be kind of running for his life on third down. I mean, the Ravens. I don't think it's fair to expect Odafe to deliver another 2-sack game. But I think we've seen them be more aggressive with blitzing, with playing man coverage. We all know that Russell Wilson, when he starts to scramble, it's usually just a death sentence for that play because he's not that creative, he's not that fast, he doesn't have a whole lot of improvisatory brilliance on that team. There's not a lot of guys who can really make stuff happen after the catch, like a Zay Flowers or even an Isaiah Likely. But we'll see. I mean, again, it could just come down to, can the Ravens cover George Pickens? They did a pretty good job with him in that game in Week 11, but they're going to have to do some coverages where they're not, dropping a safety, clouding that coverage on that side of the ball with Brandon Stevens or wherever he's lining up. And on one of those plays, it just happened to be the one where, Russell Wilson found him for that 37-yarder. And that was a big completion to kind of change the momentum in that one. So you hope that Brandon Stevens is up for the challenge. He definitely hasn't been for most of the games this year. But I feel like because of how they're going to be able to play the run, they should feel better about how they can defend deep, because you're not going to have to drop that extra safety into the box. You're going to be able to play too high. And that's the best way, I think, to limit George Pickens, especially on some of those go balls that he's been so impressive on.
I'm glad you gave Michael Pierce a shout out, because we also probably should have talked more about him on our last podcast after the Giants game, because his return to that defensive line was just so massive. And he looks even bigger than he was prior to the injury. And him coming after the quarterback is just, it's a scary thought for opposing quarterbacks. He had 3 hurries in that game that went over the Giants. Not just what he does for the run game, it's the pass game too. He's been able to get through, to break through opposing offensive lines, and having him back is just going to be massive for that defensive front. And so hopefully he's able to make his presence felt as well against the Steelers. Jonas, do you have a score prediction for this game?
I don't think I've made a single correct prediction in this series for like 4 years now. But
if you pick the Ravens, then you're going the wrong way.
I know. We're both picking small margins of victory for the Ravens. I'm going 21-20. My prediction is not as crazy as yours is, apparently. I think they're going to break 20 points. It wouldn't surprise me if maybe the Ravens just jump out to a sizable lead, like a 14-3, lead, maybe second quarter, halftime, and then just kind of have to hold things off a bit. Maybe they, start turning to the run to put this game on ice. I don't think they're going to be as ridiculously, as ludicrously effective as the Eagles were in keeping the ball out of Russell Wilson's hands in that second half. I think it was 2 drives total for that Steelers offense, because they were just able to. Yeah, in the second half, they basically doubled them up in total time of possession for the game. I don't know if the Ravens have that kind of talent up front to put this game away like that. But again, they're 6-point favorites for a reason. I think that their defense is probably better suited than it was in Week 11. We think their offense has figured some stuff out. I feel like we should see more quick game in this one to kind of counteract some of the problems that the Steelers presented in that first matchup. Obviously the pass rush is still going to be a problem, but if the Ravens can stay at a 3rd and long, and that was a huge problem for them in Week 11, I think it was like the average third down distance was 8.5 yards to go. If they can get that down to 6, if they can get that down to 5, then I feel like they're going to do a better job of just giving this defense a chance to catch its breath, and giving Justin Tucker an opportunity to make kicks that aren't 50, 48 yards.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously he's got to have the responsibility of making some of these long kicks, but if you can give him some more makeable opportunities in a game that we think will both be pretty close, and that could be the difference in a game like this.
Yeah, I also have a 1-point victory for the Ravens, 24-23. And the reason I wrote it's crazy for my prediction for this is I'm going out on a limb, and I'm saying if the Ravens win this game on Saturday, they will not lose again, at least until February. I know that's like a hot take, caller sports radio take to throw out there, and that's why, Jonas, you're laughing. But this team, I want to believe in this team. It feels in a way like the 2024 Orioles, because you see the highs of this team, you see the peaks, and you say this team at its best is the best team in the NFL. And that's how the Orioles were for the first half of the season. Now, the Orioles had a bunch of injuries, and that's a lot of the reason that they fell off. But down the stretch, I was saying, just give us a reason to believe that this team can go on a run. And they were never able to do that, and then they get swept out of the playoffs. If the Ravens win on Saturday against the Steelers, I will believe that they can go on a run in the playoffs. Because if you can get the monkey off your back in Pittsburgh, then I really think you can beat anybody. I think you can beat the Texans. You can beat them again in the playoffs. I think you could beat this Chiefs team. It's not as good as its record. The Bills, they've already beaten them in Baltimore. So it's doable. This team can go on a run. I just need to see them beat the Pittsburgh Steelers. As crazy as that is, I know that's one team, but this team needs to be more consistent in terms of its offensive firepower. They need to show that this second half defense is for real, and Justin Tucker needs to make kicks. So I think it's gonna be an awfully close game again. But if the Ravens can win a close game, a rock fight between the Steelers and the Ravens, I really believe that they could go on a run. It's just getting through this first opponent here.
Yeah, I mean, this is like a very dorky thing to say, but here in mid to late December, like the DVOA rankings have by long stabilized, and those DVOA rankings have the Ravens as the best team in the NFL. And I bring that because I bring that up because I feel like it is very, very rare that we get to this point in the season where the computer models say one thing about a team's relative strength, and the power rankings, which are a lot more subjective and a lot more eye test worthy, and based obviously on the record, have the Ravens like seventh or eighth. Like it is pretty exceptional that on paper, total body of record, the computer stats say the Ravens are the best team in the NFL.
That's
and
wild.
You look at the more human analyses of what the Ravens are, and they're saying that they're like a fringe division champion type quality team. So there is this dissonance between what the Ravens could be and what the Ravens are. And a lot of that, I think, obviously has to do with just some of the boneheaded losses that this team has taken this season. But you're not wrong that there is insane, crazy potential for what this team can be. It's just a matter of coming up to the M&T Bank and finally showing it.
Yep. All right. Well, we will be there on a cold Saturday in December to have a reaction podcast after that game. Please subscribe to the Baltimore Banner, $1 for 6 months to stay up to date with everything Ravens as we barrel towards the end of the regular season. As Jonas keeps you up to date, Gianna Hahn, Kyle Goon writing great columns as well. And subscribe to the Banner Ravens podcast. If you don't already, write us a good review, write us a 5-star review, and I'll read it out here on the show. We're excited for Saturday's game. At Jonas_Shaffer is his Twitter handle.